Hello, everybody, and welcome to Commodity Culture, where our goal is to make you a better investor in the commodities space. My name is Jesse Day. Before we dive in, standard disclaimer, nothing here is investment advice. Do your own due diligence. We bring you the information, you do the research. Today's guest is an expert in the gold and silver sector and the CEO of Miles Franklin Precious Metals, somebody we always love having on this show. It's Andy Schectman. Welcome back once again to Commodity Culture.
You know, Jesse, I always look forward to coming on with you too, brother. You're a class act, and it's a pleasure to be here. So sincerely, thank you for the invitation.
Well, thank you for coming on once again. And of course, we have to start things off with gold now at new all-time highs, at least in nominal terms. The question I'd like to ask you here is to first get your thoughts on gold's price action, what you think has brought us to this point, but also for those who view gold as an investment, maybe for those in the ETFs, whether that's the paper like the GLD or the Sprott Physical Trust. Is this a time to take profits in your view, or do you think this is a bull market that still has a ways to go from here?
I think this is the very beginning. And, you know, I'm sure some people say, well, that's rich coming from a guy that owns a precious metals company. But that has nothing to do with it. In fact, I think what we are seeing, Jesse, is a growing trend. And we will talk about this, I hope, today as we talk about the BRICS and some new developments that have come out of Novograd, a meeting that was had a few weeks ago coinciding with the G7 meeting, whereby I believe gold has been remonetized, as has oil, that it is becoming far more valuable than the currency that purchases it. It is becoming, I believe, the cornerstone of a new system, and we will hopefully get into that when we talk about the BRICS. But the amount of purchasing by the central banks is off the charts. These are the most well-funded and well-informed traders on the planet, but it's deeper than that. It's also the repatriation of the gold. And that will also play deeply into what I want to talk to you about as we talk about the BRICS. But just in the last couple of years or the last couple of months or the last couple of weeks, depending upon which countries we're talking about, some very interesting developments have happened. And I mean, we can start with the Bank of India, who purchased 1.5 times the amount of gold they did in all of 2023, just within the first 4 months of 2024. They brought it home. They repatriated it. They also simultaneously repatriated over 100 metric tons of gold they've held at the Bank of England since 1991. Now, the Bank of England would give direct access to the London Bullion Metals Exchange. The gold that all of the countries have been holding in the New York Fed gives direct access to the COMEX. In the last few weeks, we've seen not only India repatriate that 100 metric tons that they've held in the Bank of England since 91, but in the last few weeks, we saw Saudi Arabia, Nigeria, Egypt, Senegal, Ghana, Cameroon, Nigeria, all of these countries and South Africa have repatriated their gold from the Bank of England and the New York Fed. This goes along with a massive gold buying spree by these countries. And before them, you had Germany, Austria, Slovakia, Argentina, the Netherlands, Hungary, Belgium, Romania, Poland, India, as I mentioned, Turkey, France, Serbia, Venezuela, and Czechoslovakia all do the same thing. Now, all of these countries are massively accumulating gold and repatriating it. They are the most well-funded and, more importantly, the most well-informed traders on the planet. And there's a reason that we will get into where you will see this is just the beginning. There is a reason they are all repatriating their gold. And I want, most people would think it's the counterparty risk. Sure, that has a lot to do with it. The fact that the United States has weaponized the dollar in the treasury market certainly incentivizes this. And that is part of it. A country who can say, where our Treasury Secretary says to CNN, listen, we're okay with Xi Jinping and Putin being friends, they are allies in BRICS. And my first thought is, well, geez, that's really benevolent of you, Madam Secretary. But if Xi gives one penny to the Russian war machine, we will sanction their banks, their companies, and Beijing itself. Never mind the fact that we've given $260 billion to the Ukraine, Stinger missiles and F-16 jets, and intelligence on where to fire them, because we don't count. We are the world reserve currency. And my thought to that is something that is for now and growing long in the tooth. But when you see all of these countries massively buying gold and repatriating it, and then you see at the same time, it's interesting too, these central banks, Jesse, are also going deep into debt. And so they're accumulating debt and accumulating gold and repatriating the gold at the same time. And then you get the head of the Dutch National Bank talk about, our balance sheet has turned negative, but we don't care. We have 20 billion in notional gold held in our gold revaluation account. Yes, you heard that right. And all central bank balance sheets, gold is held in what's called the gold revaluation account. It is my very, very, very distinct belief that you will see central banks revalue gold to a much higher level. Now, as crazy as that sounds over my shoulder, that's what Roosevelt did. He confiscated gold and devalued the dollar by 40%, thereby revaluing gold by 40%. And if you look at what's happening in China right now, there is an arbitrage play going on where gold is 40, 50 bucks higher, maybe a little less, but silver is over $4 higher than the Western COMEX and LBMA price, or LBMA price, which is incentivizing arbitrage. But what happens if they said, look, he who has the gold and the commodities makes the rules. Let's just say we'll peg gold at $10,000 an ounce. It's important to understand that currently that gold revaluation account is on the liability side of the balance sheet. The gold that they own is on the asset side. In other words, the rules are for central banks, you're not allowed to offset liabilities with your gold asset. So they put the mirror image in what's called the revaluation account on the liability side of the balance sheet. Hence, they balance each other out, balance sheet. It would be very easy, and this is what the Dutch central banker is saying, to make their balance sheet go from putrid to pristine like that if they just revalue gold. What is gold worth? It's worth whatever the highest bidder will pay for it. And if China and India and Russia and all of these countries say gold's 10,000 an ounce, who does that benefit the most? Oh yeah, that's the countries that have been buying the hell out of it. And when you talk about China, if you believe they only have 2,600 metric tons, I have some oceanfront real estate to sell you in Arkansas, because they've been producing 400 to 500 tons a year for the last 25 years. They're the largest producers and importers in the world. For years, they never told anyone how much gold they have. Heck, we don't even tell everyone how much gold we have. Well, we do. It's supposedly 8,300 metric tons, which hasn't been audited in over 60 years. And when Ron Paul says, let's audit, no, turn down. So the point of it is all of these countries who are wickedly buying gold are not being honest about how much they are buying. You have commercial banks in China that work on behalf of the PBOC that buy gold from the refineries in South Africa and in Switzerland. They don't tell the IMF how much gold that they just bought on proxy for the PBOC. You got gold that they buy that's under 995 pure. That doesn't get reported to the IMF. Heck, the IMF came out recently, just a month or two ago, and said that the amount of gold China says they have is fugazi. It's way, way understated. And so my point to you is, why would they want to tell us how much gold they have if indeed they will revalue it? Here's how much gold we really have. And in other words, it would crowd them out of their continual accumulation of gold using the suppression of the Western central bank prices, where on the LBMA, they admit to trading 20 million ounces of gold and 290 million ounces of silver per day. However, they also admit that the numbers that they publish are 10 times understated, because they only show the settlement. If I sell you 100 contracts and I buy 200, the net is 100 for me, but they don't show that I traded 300. So if that really is the case, they're trading 200 million ounces of gold per day and 2.9 billion ounces of silver per day, or 3.5 times annual global mine supply, distorting the hell out of the price in gold and silver. And my point to you is simply this. This is just beginning. And these countries have understood the Achilles heel to the system is standing for delivery. No one ever did before. And the countries in the global south and east were never sophisticated, coordinated, or wealthy enough to do it. Now they are. And they're draining the exchanges, both the LBMA, the COMEX, the ETFs, and even the Shanghai Metals Exchange. They're all being drained. And I would tell you, this is just the very beginning, I think, of where gold ultimately goes. So for those who think they're too late or want to, in this case, take profits, do so at your own peril. I think it would be a very big mistake.
Hey guys, just a quick break to hear from today's sponsors, ARC Silver Gold Osmium. They offer personalized service and competitive prices with no minimum purchase for silver, gold, platinum, or osmium. Here's just some of the comments left on this YouTube channel about ARC SGO and owner Ian Everard. Have bought from ARC, good source and price. I cannot say enough good about Ian and his company. He is the most honest individual I could find in order to buy precious metals. If you are looking to buy precious metals, I recommend Ian at ARC Silver. He is a straight shooter. So go to arcsgo.com and contact Ian Everard today at 307-264-9441 or by email at ian@arcsgo.com, and make sure to tell him that Commodity Culture sent you. Well, I had a couple questions I wanted to ask before getting to BRICS, but forget about that. I want to go straight to the BRICS news, and then we'll return to those questions. There have been a number of interesting developments. You mentioned a meeting, which I'm unaware of, so I'd love you to talk about that. But also, we've seen China performing joint military exercises with both Russia and Belarus, with Belarus on the border of Poland there. Modi getting awarded the Order of St. Andrew the Apostle in Russia, basically the highest honor that Putin could bestow on someone. Saudi Arabia reportedly threatened to sell its EU debt holdings if the EU tried to seize Russia's frozen assets, among other developments. Talk to us about the meeting you mentioned and your thoughts on how all of this is moving forward. Is the BRICS alliance accelerating faster than most anticipated?
Yeah, absolutely, man. And you're right. I mean, Saudi Arabia is right. We steal 300 billion in Russian sovereign assets, or the EU does. I think they'd be foolish to hold any EU bonds. And the same thing is true about taking the 5 billion held in the United States. Why the hell would anyone want to hold treasuries from a country that is hypocritical, that is broke, insolvent, and is going around the world imposing these sanctions, and in fact outright theft? It's theft. It's default, and using the proceeds, even worse than all of that, to buy munitions that we make here, the military industrial complex, and giving them to the country that they're fighting in a war. I mean, it's as grotesque and egregious as can be. It's as stupid can be. It's almost too stupid to be stupid. But the point of it is that, yeah, that's real. Now, when we talk about the meeting in Novograd, this is something that, Jesse, it blows my mind at the lack of journalistic integrity in the West. They don't talk about any of this stuff, and you cannot get the hell out of the way of what you don't see coming. And that's everyone that you care about, whom you probably have a similar fate that I do. You try to help people who are maybe even very well read traditionally, just reading the wrong stuff and have no idea what you're talking about when you say these things and look at you cross-eyed. Well, the same thing is true here about this massive development, right? Massive development. So please indulge me. I'll try to do this as brief as possible, but as usual, I'm not very brief because I like to set the stage so that people can understand. All right. There was a meeting. Now, at the beginning of the year, we were told by the BRICS that there would be 200 meetings leading up to the big meeting in October, right? And every one of those meetings, BRICS specific, with things that are, this is a big process. And for people who think that this is just a shotgun deal with the BRICS, it's been going on for 17, 18 years. And now it is accelerating. It's like a roll of toilet paper. When it's new and fresh, you don't see it spinning. When it gets close to the cardboard, it starts to spin much faster. And you see that cardboard. That's a metaphor for a lot of things in life, including life itself, but also in terms of the BRICS union that is growing. Now, let's go back a few weeks before the meeting, and in June, a lot was made of Saudi Arabia not signing the exclusivity deal, not re-upping it, right? And saying, well, we're not saying we're not going to take dollars, but we're also going to take other currencies as well. Well, that was big news. And all of the things that I've talked about with you on your show before all of this happened, that all the OPEC countries on the Belt Road, Saudi Arabia joining the BRICS, Saudi Arabia joining the Shanghai Cooperation Organization. You mentioned, by the way, the president of Belarus. He also called another thing I've been saying for 3 years. He has called for a summit to introduce the SCO, the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, and I highlight the word cooperation instead of coercion, and the Eurasian Economic Union, who what's his name? Sergei Glaziev is the economic finance minister for the Eurasian Economic Union, and he is the one who has a big role in what I'm about to talk about. He has called for a meeting of these two unions to join the BRICS. It's going to happen. But all of these things that Saudi Arabia has done as a result of our signing executive order to go green, turning our backs on Saudi Arabia in many respects, and then what's happened as a result of the weaponization of the treasury market, the dollar market. So in any case, there's this meeting in Novigrad, and it coincided with the G7 meeting. And the Royal Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia turned down an invitation to the G7 meeting. So I'm too busy, you guys, but thanks for the invite. And then sends his finance ministers to the BRICS meeting in Novigrad, where 20,000 people attended in over 130 or 40 countries. And what came out of this meeting were a couple of very big developments. First development was that 59 countries said we're joining BRICS, on top of the 10 that are already there. Now, we'll know in October which ones of those 59 have been admitted and have formally applied, but 59 countries have come out and said we're going to join BRICS, and a whole bunch more are contemplating. But a bigger development came out, and that was two meetings between Sergei Glaziev. Now, Sergei is, this finance minister who's been saying for 3 years, this is why I've been saying that the BRICS currency will be pegged to a basket of commodities and a basket of currencies. He's the architect of all this. The meeting was between Glaziev, Putin, and Dilma Rousseff. Dilma Rousseff, for your listeners who don't know, was the former president of Brazil and is now the president of the BRICS New Development Bank. This is no small job. She is the head of the BRICS New Development Bank. And she came out and confirmed that in the two meetings, they have agreed in principle to a new BRICS settlement currency called the unit. We're going to get into that in a moment. And that it would all be traded over Project M-Bridge. Now, I don't know if I've spoken with you about M-Bridge, but I have talked a lot about it over the last year and a half or so. It came out in 2023. It's actually been developed for years before that, but developed between China, Hong Kong, Thailand, and the United Arab Emirates. It is a cross-border payment system that allows these countries to trade their central bank digital currencies with one another, not going through any United States intermediary banks or the SWIFT system. And I believe that gold and oil have been remonetized, right? I've said that incessantly, including, look at oil. I always talk about gold, but look at oil in terms of its value. China was awarded a massive $2 or $3 billion contract to modernize Iran's biggest airport. And they're being paid for it in oil. Not dollars like it used to be, but in oil. So I find it ironic that the first two trades that they did in testing this system were between China and the UAE using digital yuan to buy oil and to buy gold. And they worked. And now it is working. And what's interesting about the Project M-Bridge is that Saudi Arabia just became a full participant in Project M-Bridge, which is not compatible with U.S. dollars. Not compatible with U.S. dollars. The largest oil producer in the world, who just joined BRICS, became a full participant in M-Bridge. Dilma Rousseff said that the new unit currency will be 40% gold, not a basket of commodities, but 40% gold, and 60% a basket of local currencies. Now, as far as the basket of gold, What did the BIS reclassify gold as? BIS being the most powerful bank on the planet. Well, they reclassify gold, ironically, as the only other tier one reserve asset. And it's interesting, if we go back to 2017, you had all of these banks that I mentioned repatriating their gold. The Bundesbank, Austria, Hungary, Turkey, Poland, the Czech National Bank, the Dutch National Bank, on and on and on. Weird at the time. Those same banks in 18 bought more gold as a group than they did in the 60 years previously combined. And then the next year in 2019, that number was doubled. Go on a wicked buying spree and repatriation spree. And then somehow miraculously out of nowhere, the BIS says, oh, by the way, gold is now a tier one asset, the only other one next to US dollars and treasuries, as if they weren't told this. Guess who is behind Project Enbridge as well? Oh, yeah. That would be the Bank of International Settlements. They are a full participant and developer with alongside China, Hong Kong, UAE, and Thailand in Project Enbridge, which is not compatible with US dollars, which Saudi Arabia just joined in on. Now, I want to read something to you. I think I probably already did, but just in case. Germany, Austria, Slovakia, Argentina, Netherlands, Saudi Arabia, Hungary, Belgium, Egypt, Senegal, Romania, Nigeria, Poland, Ghana, India, Turkey, France, Serbia, Venezuela, Algeria, Cameroon, South Africa, Czechoslovakia, to name a few of the banks that have all repatriated their gold from the New York Fed, i.e. the COMEX, and the Bank of England, i.e. the London Bullion Metals Association, along with the central banks buying more gold than any time in the last 100 years, ever in central bank history. And the BIS is involved in it. Now, when I tell you about this unit, it's going to be the aha. My point to you is, I'm going to say to you once again, the BIS has told these banks around the world what to do, that what I'm about to tell you is coming. And so Project Enbridge will not allow the U.S. to sanction other countries because they're not even part of it. And it is not compatible with US dollars, right? So all of these countries will be able to develop their own central bank digital currencies, every one of them. And they will trade with one another using their central bank digital currencies. Now, the unit currency, which it has been developed, and they said we have in principle agreed upon using the unit as a BRICS settlement currency. And here's the interesting thing, right? Think about what I was just saying about how the BIS tells these players what to do a few years before. So the unit currency is incredibly interesting. First of all, 40% gold in kilo bars, 60% gold or local currencies of the BRICS plus countries. Now, my belief is the countries who want their currencies as part of the 60%, like China, they will do all they can to back their currencies by gold, and Russia too. And India. These are the countries. India bought 1.5 times the amount of gold they bought in all of last year in the first 4 months, and they brought it home. The countries that will represent the 60% within the BRICS will be wickedly rich in gold. Another reason to not tell the world how much they have. But here's where it gets interesting. The white paper on the unit says that 40% gold holding will, when the countries create these tokens, if you will, for the settlement, it will be 40% gold, 60% basket of BRICS plus currencies. Those currencies in that gold are moved into an escrow account, but all of the gold is held within the borders of the countries who possess it. The gold will not need to be sent to Beijing. The gold will not need to be sent to Moscow. It will be massively independently audited with huge violations for deviation from protocol. And it will be callable, deliverable if people want. So do you think there's any coincidence that these central banks have been buying at a level the world has never seen? Think of what they did with reclassification of gold. They start loading up on gold and repatriating it. Oh, by the way, it's tier one. Now they start loading up again and really repatriating, including bringing all their gold home from the Bank of England and the New York Fed. And the white paper, which Delma Rousseff says we've agreed in principle to, in terms of a new settlement currency, will be 40% gold, and it will be held within the borders of the countries that possess it, audited independently. So this is why they're bringing it home, because they know it will be part of a new system that will massively end any desire to hold U.S. treasuries, which the petrodollar deal said at the excess currency goes into treasuries. Why the hell would they want to do that? Gold has outpaced the 10-year treasury 2-1. It's doubled its performance over the last 25 years with no counterparty liability. It's just passed it recently over the last 50 years in terms of its ultimate performance. Just barely. It's doubled it in the last 25 years. And what I'm simply saying to you is that these countries now will have a massive desire and incentive to accumulate gold, which will allow them to create the settlement token held within their own borders instead of the Bank of England and the New York Fed, which are massively rehypothecated and corrupt, which blur the real value of gold. And all of these countries who have been supporting our exorbitant lifestyle, the good graces of our foreign creditors, are now selling treasuries because they can be stolen from you and replacing it with gold, which has doubled the performance of the treasury, has no counterparty risk, and will be the backbone of a new system that is then traded over Enbridge, which Saudi Arabia is a full participant in, that is not compatible to U.S. dollars. And it's also important, I think, to understand that, this is a game whereby these settlement tokens, if you will, which again are held in escrow and can be deliverable, will at first only be for the governments and will only be valued upon really the gold within it. But they envision a time where the supply-demand fundamentals for the unit token take over. And so the incentive to hold treasuries is gone. And when you talk about the incentive to hold gold, it's increasing by the day and removing counterparty risk. One last key point about the Enbridge and the unit infrastructure is that everyone's talking about, a BRICS common currency. That's not what this is. Every single country, and they make mention of this, every single country will be able to maintain their own monetary autonomy. They'll have their own economies within their own borders instead of being reliant upon a third party like the United States dollar. They will all be able to have their own monetary autonomy and authority, and they're going to keep their house in order and peg their currency to gold, so it will be part of the BRICS settlement currency, the unit. They can trade with one another over Enbridge using their central bank digital currencies, but if they need to settle for energy, they have the token, the unit token, deliverable in gold, held within their own borders. All of this is a fuse, if you will, that was just lit under the dollar. And there will come a point what starts out little by little by little by little as these countries accumulate gold, sell treasuries, not too fast to cut off their nose to spite their face, but fast enough because we're getting late in the hour, whereby, it's a very scary, a very, very scary prognosis for the Western system and for the dollar and for the treasury market. And these countries, first it was 5, now it's 10, 59 said they want to join. You're talking the majority of human population, military might, GDP, commodities. You talk about this green agenda, by the way, real quick, and then I'll stop and answer any questions you have on this or move on. There was just a report that came out by JP Morgan saying that last year in 23, China and the Eurasian continent were responsible for producing and mining 80% of the rare earths, but China was responsible for refining 100% of the rare earths. What they are doing is building a system on commodities, as Zoltan Pozsar said over and over and over and over again, instead of the debt, the opaque debt instruments of a broken, insolvent, and hypocritical and sanction-happy country. This is real. And the fact that the public doesn't know this or the media doesn't talk about it is pathetic as far as I'm concerned. So yeah, it's just getting started, Jesse, and it's getting very, very real.
Yeah, I think a big piece of the puzzle is countries divesting themselves of treasuries, as you mentioned, and turning to gold instead. I think we'll see that trend continue for sure. I had Alistair McLeod on the show just the last episode. He said he sees a collapse of all credit instruments incoming, including fiat currency, bonds, stocks as well, on the horizon. Now, he thinks mining shares might provide an exception in terms of the equity side of things, because they could start pricing their costs in gold, especially if they're producing gold or silver. That kind of gives them a different perspective on things. I wonder what your thoughts are on that, and how you think about asset allocation. Do you think people should be completely out of the stock market, out of the bond market, and keeping as much of their wealth as possible in gold and silver? Again, a loaded question to ask a precious metals dealer, as people in the comments will point out. Or do you think mining shares are something that provide a leverage play on gold and silver? How do you view that side of things?
I happen to think Alistair is one of the smartest people I know, and I would never even attempt to try and challenge his intellect. Let's just get that straight. Go back to the Great Depression. Homestake mining was the number one performing stock in the entire, when during the market collapse. It was the number one performing stock in the entire stock market when everything collapsed. I agree with Alistair on most everything he ever says. The only thing is that I would not put an overwhelming amount of faith in the mining companies doing that, because things could get very ugly very fast. Maybe a guy like Keith Neumeyer might actually do something like that, as he's one of the only businessmen running a mining company in what is predominantly being run by geologists who don't see things as clearly as a guy like Keith does. Yeah, I think there's certainly value in mining shares. And if I had to guess where we are heading, look, we have almost $200 trillion in debt. Medicare Part B, 99 trillion underfunded. Part D, the prescriptions, 22 trillion underfunded. Social Security, 77. Government military pensions. We're creating 1 trillion in debt every 100 days. That's 100,000 every second. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. That's how fast we're accumulating debt. Inflation is going nowhere. Inflation is only going to get worse and worse and worse and worse and worse, especially as countries around the world start divesting more and more and more of dollars and treasuries. I could see the stock market going ballistic. I could. But in terms of, and I can see gold going ballistic. I think it will bring on how do you even say it? It would bring on a mega trend in commodities. And I think the stock market will probably go higher in that environment, maybe a lot higher, but lower in terms of ounces of gold. And so I think that when you talk about it going higher and higher and higher, what's it really worth? You need to have a barometer to measure it against. If measuring it in dollars, sure, it could go way higher, but measuring it in ounces of gold, I believe it will go way lower. And so I think that's the only thing that I would push back against, is that most of these mining companies are hand to mouth. They don't have the financing or the bankroll to disintermediate and go directly to the public like that. Most of them are reliant upon the bullion banks to give them the money, because they spent all their money digging it out and financing it and all the costs associated with mining. So maybe over time, but yeah, history shows that homestake mining, when everything else collapsed, was number one. It would be better than owning other stocks, perhaps. But I do think that I would not say it's out of the realm of possibility that the stock market rip roars, but measuring it in an inflationary, massive inflationary environment, but measuring it in ounces of gold, I think it will end up being less and less and less in terms of its ounces of gold.
And what do you think about having some cash on the sidelines at the moment, perhaps rolling over in 3-month treasury bills? They're paying around 5% at this point in time. Those on kind of one end of the spectrum would say even that might not be safe in terms of where you want to have your capital. Others like David Rosenberg would say cash is no longer trash. You're getting paid 5% to sit and wait. He's expecting a downturn in the broad market and some buying opportunities. What are your thoughts on holding cash on the sidelines?
It's the only other asset I own is 6-month or less duration treasuries. And for those people that want to disintermediate pretty much all risk, and except the big one, and that is to go directly to treasurydirect.gov and buy right from the U.S. government short-term duration treasuries, instead of buy a big mega bank that would sell them to you. I own one of the largest gold companies in America. I have been buying gold every 2 weeks for 35 years almost. I have a managed account with Sprott where I have mining shares. out of respect for all the business that they've sent my way over the years. I don't even know what I have. I have a good friend there named Eric Angeli, who's a broker who runs my account. I trust him. I know that I need to have exposure to mining shares. You take everything else out of the equation. The only other place I have money is in short-term treasuries, and very short duration treasuries. I think anyone that goes out in duration needs to have their head checked. But short-term treasuries would give you that powder. And yeah, he's right. 5% is good. Not as good as when you see that, what the real levels of inflation are, but better than we've seen in a long time. It's still a negative real return if we were honest about inflation. But believing their Fugazi CPI number of 3%, yeah, your positive real yield of 2.5%, it's a good place to put it. It's the only other place that I put it other than precious metals and mining shares. And that's the honest to God truth.
Very interesting insight. I do want to switch a little bit to the political realm at the moment. I know some people don't like that so much. They say stick to precious metals. It's funny, I had Jeffrey Christian on the show not too long ago, somebody who's quite hated in the precious metals community, but I think he does say some very valid things. And one of the things he said was that the gold market is inextricably connected to politics. You can't necessarily separate the true and the two. And on that point, I definitely agree with him. Let's talk about the attempted assassination of Donald Trump, because you've spoken on this show before about how divided America is becoming in terms of the political realm and just how divided people are becoming in general. It's either my side or your side. Nobody wants to listen to the other side. It's all about proving yourself right without attempting to put yourself in the other person's shoes. How do you see this event changing things, if at all? Can anything positive come of this? Is this just all doom and gloom? How do you see this all playing out?
Well, I will say of everything I've ever heard Jeffrey Christian say, that to me is spot on. I think that the gold market is geopolitical events and political events, and it's never been more so ever. That's everything I've been talking about for 2 years. The weaponizing of the dollar and the signing the executive order to go green, there's your geopolitical. And in terms of political, look, when people are around the world are thinking, do we want to hold dollars and treasuries after seeing weaponization and a country that's creating all of this debt, $1 trillion in debt every 100 days? It took 200 years to do that. You look at the immigration. What immigration system do we have? We don't have an immigration system. We have 20 million people in here illegally. When you look at the Justice Department, people wonder, is it politicized? Is it two-tiered? I don't care what your view is on Trump or Biden. Be honest with yourself and say, has Merrick Garland and the Justice Department acted honorably, and is there a two-tiered system? And I would say most people would question that. When you talk about the electoral system, well, here we go. I mean, most people would say that there was some very strange going-ons in the last election. No matter how you feel about either candidate, people around the world are saying, are their elections fair? Is their judicial system fair? Their immigration system is a mess. There's lawlessness in their cities, and they're creating $1 trillion in debt, which is political because it's the irresponsible, brain-dead fiscal sanity that's been, it's just ridiculous, the fiscal irresponsibility and the monetary brain-dead policy. That's all political. But let's just simply say this. I've been shooting guns for years. I own a metals company. I've had a concealed permit for 15 years or longer. And I shoot so that I, God forbid, ever have to be proficient in it. I've shot plenty of AR-15s. And from 100 yards away with a laser dot, it's a 2-foot putt. It's that easy. You could hit an apple off of someone's head pretty damn easily. And 1/8 of an inch separates sanity from craziness. 1/8 of an inch. What would the world look like today? What would Xi Jinping and Putin be talking about if Trump had been killed? And let's just call it what it is. There was an attempted assassination of him. And ask yourself, I don't care what side you're on, ask yourself, if this were your kids speaking and you were in charge of security, look at that overhead view. How the hell did they not have protection on a direct sight of line 120 yards away, a pitching wedge? How the hell do they not have a direct line of sight covered? How? You can say what you want, and there's a real fine line between conspiracy and reality, but if that ain't frickin' political, I don't know what is. They attempted to kill the guy. And the The powers that be can say, we didn't do this. We had nothing to do with this, blah, blah, blah. All I can tell you is this. You look at that overhead and say, that's the number one place that you would put your snipers or your police presence. Not on the roof above him. Sure, you can see everything here. But how about the direct line of sight right there that no one is guarding? And an eighth of an inch separates today from what could be madness. And I would say that it's everything. Politics and geopolitical events are everything, because it's all of the politics that has created the craziness in this country, the open borders, the judicial system, the electoral system. It's the politics that are spending $1 trillion in debt, bankrupting our future generations every 100 days. 100,000 per second. Buy. I mean, I hate to be that way too, but I think to ignore it is stupid. And I think it's every bit as stupid to think that there wasn't some understanding of what was about to happen as it is for us to believe that Jean-Pierre, the press secretary, and all of the mainstream left media just realized for the first time that President Biden was mentally compromised, that he was slipping, that he was getting what appears to be dementia. They just realized it because of his poor performance at the debate. I mean, you want to talk about being disingenuous? I don't know what is. So I guess we're all supposed to believe that they just realize it, and that, they didn't think it was a problem to leave a roof 120 yards away with a direct line of sight to the stage, leaving that open. I think it's everything, Jesse. And that's just part and parcel to all the other madness that we've seen over the past few years. And I love this country. I am a patriot. It has given me opportunities. I'm the least likely person to be sitting here having this conversation with you. And this country has given me opportunities that I thank God every day for, and I love it. And nothing upsets me more. Nothing, as you can tell by how fired up I am, nothing upsets me more than to see what's happening to this wonderful country, and the way the rest of the world must just be saying, what the hell are we watching? Is this the Twilight Zone? Is this bizarro world? And for all of those people that said the right, which I believe is the working man now, ain't what it used to be, are the ones that are radical. Where are these crazy protests and the ripping down of the cities and I left Minnesota because the other side went nuts and burned down my city and the 3rd precinct on TV and destroyed my city to the point where I was so freaked out by all the videos I was doing and the city saying Antifa's coming out to the suburbs. You have to be locked in at 7:00, sleeping with the gun on my nightstand. I voted with my feet and left. And after what just happened, where's the madness by the right and the protests? See, the whole thing is politicized. The whole thing is nuts. And yeah, it does matter. And I think it's everything.
Well, Andy, we always appreciate your thoughts. This has been a fantastic conversation. For those watching who are asking, what about silver? When are they going to talk about silver? Don't worry. We have Andy coming back next week for part 2 of this interview, where we're going to hone in on the silver sector. Before I let you go for today, Andy, tell us about Miles Franklin Precious Metals and where people can find that.
We've been in business. Will be 35 years here at the end of the year. We've done $10 billion in sales without a customer complaint. We're very proud of our reputation. Means the world to me. And for those people who have questions on anything that they've heard on this interview, they can email us at info@milesfranklin.com or anything else on their mind, or precious metal centric, like precious metals IRAs. We also publish a price sheet that we do not post on our website, which only allows purchasing up to 10 grand. Our price sheet that we will send you, and you could, send an email and in the subject line say, Commodity Culture sent me or Jesse sent me in the subject line, and we will send you the price list. If that's all you want, it will be amongst the most competitive price lists in the country. And so if you want to be contacted by myself or one of our 12 brokers who have very distinguished careers long before they started working here. All of them, every one of them, my friends since childhood. Wall Street people who are working on Wall Street or going to school at Wharton or masters of business administration from Temple. All very prestigious careers leading up to coming to work for me, but they're all my dear friends, all of them. We're a big family. Send us an email at info@milesfranklin. Put your phone number if you want to be contacted. Ask any questions or just ask for the price list. And it would be our honor truly to help any way that we can.
Great. Well, I'll put a link to the Miles Franklin website in the description below for people who do want to check that out.
Please put a link to info@milesfranklin as well, the email, because that's really the important one.
Yeah, absolutely will do. And thank you for coming on once again. And we'll see you next week to talk about silver. I can't wait.
Dude, I'm always psyched to come on with you. Thanks for having me and look forward to picking up where we left off.
And thank you for joining us today. This episode is sponsored by ARC Silver Gold Osmium. For all your precious metals needs, head to arcsgo.com and contact owner Ian Everard today at 307-264-9441 or by email at ian@arcsgo.com, and make sure to tell him that Commodity Culture sent you, and I'll see you guys on the next episode. Commodity Culture is a series on commodities and natural resources. If you would like to see more, be sure to subscribe and hit the bell notification so you're always up to date with the latest episodes.